I'm Nathan Presmyk with Stantec. Some of you may recognize me from the ACE Mentor program, but we have a long history through Pencil partners at Stantec here in Nashville of having job shadows at our office, and then I'm there every other Tuesday during the school year when things are normal to run the ACE Mentor program with some other architect and engineering and construction firms here in Nashville. So quick shout out for the ACE Mentor program. And if you have any questions or don't know about it and are interested in finding out more and participating in that, you can talk to Miss Hamilton over at Overton, and she'll give you all the details for that. But today I just want to introduce myself and talk a little bit about civil engineering, what we do as civil engineers. I'm been with Stantec now for almost 10 years, but grew up in California and Texas, and then moved up to Nashville for college over at Vanderbilt. Got my civil engineering degree, and then I've been working with Stantec ever since. So you may or may not know what civil engineering is. It can look like a lot of different things, and one of the things we work with is water, just to put it simply, and that can mean anything from treating wastewater, the stuff you flush down the toilets or runs down your sink, and providing that treatment to send it back into the ecosystem. Or it can look like treating the water that you drink, right? The water in Percy Priest Lake, for example, taking that to a treatment facility so that you can make it drinkable or potable for use at home. So those are some examples. One of the things, though, that I specifically get to work with as a civil engineer is stormwater and handling that. And so what I mean by stormwater is pretty self-explanatory. When storms come through, and that could be anything from a small rain up to a big once in a 100-year event, but that water has to go somewhere, right? And so if you're in a city and in an urban environment, you have a lot of, which we are obviously not right now, and you'll find out more here in a second about where we are, but there's a big consideration of making sure you can take that water that's hitting the ground and maybe doesn't have anywhere to go, for a paved surface or roofs, right? That water no longer can infiltrate into the ground or soak up into the ground once you've built up roads and buildings. And so it's especially important in urban environments to make sure you're able to capture that water and then send it safely away and not flood the streets. So when I talk stormwater, I mean all design aspects related to that, how to handle it, how to treat it, and how to take it away or use it in a useful manner. So today, to narrow in and kind of focus our discussion even a little bit more, I want to talk about green infrastructure practices, or GIP is a term you'll hear, and then low impact design is another name for it, or LID. And within that, one of the methods we have is called rainwater harvesting. Which sounds kind of interesting, like you're maybe holding out your hands or a bucket to try to catch rainwater, and that's actually pretty close to what it is, but we have some other engineering advantages that make that process a little more efficient. So I'm normally designing these on a larger scale, so buildings you see downtown or housing developments, and thinking about it on a more, I guess, bigger picture application. But this is the same type of technology and methods that you could also think about on a smaller scale, even for your own home. So today we're in New Mexico right now on vacation visiting my wife's parents, and they've let me take a tour of their property to kind of show some of the things they're doing here in the mountains of New Mexico, which may have different needs and different considerations, right? But it rains everywhere, no matter how frequent it is. And so here they even are able to take advantage of that for as little as it rains compared to where we are in Nashville. But first, let's take a look over here at a very, very simple application. So rainwater harvesting. When I said catching it in a bucket, that's exactly what this is. This is a barrel you can get from like a Tractor Supply store. They make specific rain barrels these days, but what we have is there's not even a pipe coming down right now. This is just water running off of the roof, and you'll see there's no, maybe at home you have gutters that collect your water coming off. Here in this particular location, it's just a known spot where enough water comes down off of this roof line that it can just drip straight down into the rain barrel. And what they have here, if you want to come a little closer, on top is a filter, a mesh filter. Again, very simple, right? But just to catch debris and make sure we're not clogging our hoses. And so this is maybe the most basic of applications, but it's taking water that otherwise would get wasted and taking advantage of the roof area, right? It's falling across this large roof area, then gets concentrated and sent down into a single point. And so with gutters and different other things, you can channelize water and even funnel even more roof area to a single point. But for this purpose, all they want to do is be able to collect water, store it here, so that they can use it instead of just watering the crops when it rains, right, for their garden. They can collect it and then use it slowly over time by turning on a valve, and then they have a hose where they can water their garden and use the water as needed instead. So could just let it run into the ground, and that's fine too. It's not going to create any issues in this particular location, but there's an opportunity to take that roof water and use it elsewhere later on. So now's a good pause point, I think, after running through this simple setup, to talk about a couple questions or discussion points. So first one is, they're using this water to water their garden, but what are some other applications you could use harvested rainwater in a simple system like this for? What are some other ways this water could be useful? The second question or discussion topic is, what are some limitations of this design, right? It's got a lot of benefits to it, of being low cost, simple, easy to install and use. But what might be some things that you couldn't use this water for with a simple mesh filter and sitting out here, in the sun? What issues could that create, and what would that potentially keep you from doing with this water beyond some of the applications I mentioned and you've maybe talked about? So next, after you have a chance to discuss those, I'll take you around to the other side of the house, show you the gardens where this water is used, and then talk about the rest of their rainwater harvesting system. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to think about and talk about this very simple rainwater barrel design on the back. We want to show you first where that goes, which is we have a hose kind of run around the building here, connected to just your typical garden hose, and that allows, when they turn that valve on back there, allows them to water these garden beds here, right? So small barrel, a single use, but still a very a great way to reuse a natural resource of rainfall. But if you want to capture more water, you need more than just a single barrel. And so what they've done here in this unique climate of New Mexico, where water actually, they are dealing with much more water scarcity up here. So to not be reliant on groundwater and wells and to be more self-sufficient, they've gone an extra step. And so they're not just capturing the water in that one barrel. What they're actually doing is taking water off of multiple areas of this roof line that all drain down to the deck here. Now this deck, of course, lets water through in between the boards. And more importantly, instead of just running through these boards and onto the ground, underneath, they've got a system of corrugated vinyl and a gutter that runs all along the length of this deck that lets water filter through, captures it, prevents it from hitting the ground, funnels it to a gutter, and this gutter routes all the way over to this pipe here that then drops underground. So now, instead of just a single barrel at a single point along the roof, they've taken the entirety of this half of the house and all of these roof lines that come down to the deck and have a place to capture all of that water and send it underground. And in a second, we'll show you walk this way a little bit, and you'll see a few more areas where they collect them, and we'll talk about what they do to make it more usable than just for gardening. Okay, so looking back to orient yourselves, we were just up here on the hillside by their garden beds, and then that under deck collection system. You can see the pipe running down underground. So it comes all the way over to where we are standing, which is the first tank they installed. So this was originally going to be a supplementary system to the water system they were connected to. So it's a bit smaller tank. You can see they've since added one over here to get even more capacity, but these large tanks allow them to collect all of that roof water and collect it here, and then the stored water gets filtered through a variety of processes. So there's some proprietary technology that is a vortex type design, and I can send a link and information out at the end so you can see that system. But that basically settles out your major debris before it collects in here, so that it's not as much of a maintenance issue. That's right there at the downspout that we just were at before it even makes it to these tanks and gets rid of most of the big stuff. But now you still have your little guys, right? Your bacteria, your viruses, and all of that. And so before this makes it up into the house, it'll get pumped up and run through a series of filters, membranes, but then also ultraviolet light. And that'll help remove the bacteria and kill any remaining viruses so that they can actually use it for drinking, dishwashing, showering, all of your needs, right? What you would normally plug into the city's water system, they're able to collect rainwater off their roof, bring it to these tanks, and then treat it as they take it back to the house. So it's almost a miniature water treatment plant. So this is taking things a step beyond your typical rainwater harvesting. And it's kind of cool to be out in a desert climate like this and see how even with less rain than we have in Nashville, there's still opportunity, and it may still be worth the investment, depending on where you're at, to actually capture that rainwater and use it in a really neat way. So lastly, we'll show, besides these tanks, I want to show you one more area where they collect the rainwater and take it down here, and just another opportunity of where we can get rainwater from and how we as engineers think about that design and where to take stormwater, whether we're treating it for a drinking water system, using it in a more unfiltered way for plant life and landscaping, or just simply slowing down that process rather than sending it into the streets and gutters and pipes, and letting it infiltrate over time to bring higher quality water back into the ground and groundwater system. Okay, so we just walked over from the storage tanks and talked a little bit about how that water is captured, sent to those tanks, and then can be drawn from and treated with additional filtration and ultraviolet light. And there's all kinds of systems to do that, but in this case, it's one that they've used to allow it to be drinkable, usable water within their home. So to take this all back a step into that more stormwater management and low impact design mentality, I wanted to briefly talk about what I mean by infiltration, impervious cover, and kind of what building and development does, what the impacts are, and then what our opportunities are to lessen those impacts and or take advantage of that new condition. So we look uphill over here, you can kind of see that, you get an idea of what the land looked like before this structure was built. So this is a garage, kind of warehouse type building that they've built to store vehicles and other equipment. This looks very similar to maybe a commercial warehouse or structure you've seen around town. And this is a good simplified example of a building that we would help an architect work with as civil engineers, and figure out how to take stormwater and manage that stormwater, but then also treat it and hopefully use it well. So when you look uphill there, that natural ground, that's going to let water flow across vegetation, across dirt. It'll infiltrate, and that means just percolate or seep into the ground. And so instead of it evaporating or running off downhill onto someone else's property, in an area like this, it's probably going to be able to be taken up mostly by the plants and soil, and then used by that vegetative life. So when we start to put things down like gravel for roads, this still is going to let some water get through, but some more may evaporate and less may infiltrate into the ground. And then especially when we put down a concrete pad and a roof over top of it for buildings like this, like I said, a very good simple example. I mean, think about what that does to your rainwater versus what was happening in its natural state. And it doesn't have to be a forest, it could be an open field, you know. In any case, usually when we're putting a building in, we're increasing what we call impervious cover. And impervious means just a barrier that water can't get through, but that water still has to go somewhere, right? And so that's where in an urban environment, no matter what we're doing with that stormwater treatment wise, we have to manage it because it's going to run off that building, run across sidewalks, and we're going to create conditions where areas of town, even locally, can get flooded in a big storm event. So one of the things we do on buildings is we take gutter systems, and you can see this running lengthwise across the roof line. So instead of a sheet of water pouring down across your building entrances, being a nuisance for pedestrians, that's taken into a gutter, and then it runs down each of these columns. You can see these downspouts. And normally, you may recognize these at your house or around town. They can discharge just out onto the surface and run out. And if it's a parking lot, they'll just run across the parking lot to the nearest inlet, or if it's a grass area, they will be able to run and infiltrate into the ground. In this case, they've taken advantage of this area, this building area that was naturally infiltrating, has now been blocked by impervious cover. They already have their water treatment system, so this is an opportunity now, in this case, to capture that rainwater, take it to this gutter system, funnel it underground, and what they've done, you can see, it drops down into these pipes, and these pipes run underground, 180 behind us, all the way back to those storage tanks you can see in the distance, and that can get pulled into their treatment and filtration system to be used in the house. Okay, I know we've covered a lot of ground here today, focused mainly on rainwater harvesting, and looked at a few different applications just within this home site of how on a small residential scale you can use a low impact design principle to make use out of something, a stormwater runoff and rainfall, and make that a useful resource, right? So this is a very small scale example of what we as civil engineers are looking at on a daily basis as we help developers and architects and contractors build the new buildings and developments you see around you in Nashville. And these same principles can be applied on a larger scale or as smaller pockets throughout a site. So no matter the size of the building or the needs, right? We may not be able to, off a single building, provide treated water to supply the whole city or even that building, depending on the demand. But you usually have landscaped areas and things that you can take what would have been an intensive use of city water and potentially harvest rainwater and use that water instead. And it's lower bill, it's a more environmentally friendly, and it's an opportunity to manage that stormwater that would otherwise have to be sent down into piping and inlets to take it away from the buildings. Instead, you can send it to vegetated or landscaped areas potentially, and it's kind of a win-win. So that's one type of low impact design for stormwater quantity and quality control. There are many others though, and so I guess first question I might leave you with is think about where rainwater harvesting could be used, what opportunities there are to use technology like this for rainwater capture, both maybe around your home and then throughout your community, maybe around campus. So think about areas where you see a chance to potentially capture and use that rainwater. The second one is not so much a question, but more of a opportunity to research further. But if this interests you, this is just one of many types of LID design. So instead of capturing rainwater directly off of a normal roof, you can do something called a green roof, which is actually soil and vegetation that helps lower the heating and cooling costs. It's more insulating for the structure itself, but then can actually capture and use that water at the source instead of taking it off of the roof and running it to other vegetation or water storage. That can be taken up directly by plants and vegetation, and instead of reflecting or absorbing heat rather on the roof, now you've got this plant photosynthesis and natural process occurring and all of the benefits associated with that. So where we took a pervious area, vegetated area, and put a building down, we can almost recreate that vegetated area on the roof of the structure. So green roofs is another one, and there's many more beyond that. So I'll send some links at the end of this video for you to look in further and see, maybe rainwater harvesting is something that will or won't work for you or at your home, or as you're thinking about things like an engineer. But there's other types of low impact design and green practices you can use to manage stormwater. So I encourage you to look in further. Hopefully this was educational and gave you some food for thought or discussion. And we, myself, Nathan, and others at Stantec, we have civil engineers, environmental scientists, we have all kinds of professionals that are more than happy to share their wisdom and expertise. But hopefully this was a good introduction into civil engineering, stormwater management, low impact design. And I'll give my information so that if you and or your class have any questions, I'm happy to follow up and give you more resources. But thanks for your time.